I want to start with saying thank you to Furality for giving me this opportunity. Thank you to those who are in the instance with me, and thank you to those who are watching. And also a special thanks to Max Films VR for encouraging me to apply to do this talk. It's a pleasure to be speaking at the convention this year. My name is Joe Hunting, and I'm here to talk about filmmaking, specifically reflecting on my feature film, We Met in Virtual Reality, which is a documentary film. And for those who are coming to this talk completely fresh, I want to set the scene, first of all, with just a really quick intro to the film that I'll be discussing later. We Met in Virtual Reality is a feature-length documentary that paints a broad portrait of VRChat during the pandemic through the eyes of these wonderful people and a few more and their communities. And to start with, I'd love to play the release date trailer of the film that was edited by the film's distributor, HBO.
Making friends here is sometimes what saves people's lives, or what gets them up out of bed in the morning.
I am a teacher for Helping Hands, a sign language community here in VRChat.
Hand rested under our elbow, and we're gonna go like this. Christmas.
Slow. Quick, slow. If I had confidence that I could teach dance as a living in VR, I totally would do exactly that.
With a long-distance relationship, having VR is a game changer.
We are 5,000 miles apart, but we're gonna try our best to make it work.
This year has been really hard. The thing that has kept me sane has been VR and the VR community. I would not have weathered this without you guys. 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year!
You can be who you've always wanted to be, and you can, in a way, start over.
We can come together and support each other. This community means a lot to me, and I really want them to know that they're loved.
True. It's been a year since I've seen Kevin's IRL body.
Sounds
or
funny.
his IRL avatar.
That was We Met in Virtual Reality, or the trailer to it. And since the film's release, I've been really fortunate to talk about the making of the documentary at different universities and festivals in the US, Denmark, Norway, Brazil, Spain, and the UK, of course. And I'm doing a really similar talk than I've done before, but with some more reflections on being an independent filmmaker and how I found my creative process in doing so. This talk ended up being quite reflective on my own filmmaking journey, which I hope can inspire not just filmmakers, but any creative people who are watching and listening. I also use this as an opportunity to ask myself why documentaries in VR has been so fulfilling to me creatively. And I found it really hard to answer that question without acknowledging my previous films. So I'm going to take you through the whole origin story of some of my short films and a series I made, which led to the making of We Met in Virtual Reality. But to start with, I'd like to share some background on me. I got into documentary filmmaking as a teenager, specifically with travel photography. My early influences were an experimental art film, and I studied art and film at college. And it was in college that I created a whole collection of really weird experimental documentaries that I shot on my phone and DSLR camera. So my interest in documentary has always been in experimental work. Most of these films were video diaries from when I went traveling and were just outlets for my own personal reflections. And this one I have a clip to show is called Around Nepal.
¿Qué onda? Esto está raro.
Can I get video of the swinging? I can show you. We can get a good one. Is Samuel wave, Samuel? Thank you. I found a lot of fulfillment in crafting really immersive handmade portraits of a place through film, especially in the sound design. It's important to say that my early work was very much just for myself and was a way of grounding myself in my memories and wanting to celebrate and seal a time capsule for the traveling and the trips that I went on. And I feel really lucky that I discovered that artistic expression at a very young age, as it really helped my broody teenage years and wanting to put art out into the world for myself. And for any curious art film folks, these are two artists that were really key influences at the start of my explorations with film, Leda Luxundi and Ben Rivers. Both are artists who shoot on 16mm film and create really symbolic and poetic images in their films. But considering that they're both 16mm artists, their films are quite hard to find, but you can read and research about these two artists if you're curious. After a lot of experimental stuff, I wanted to bring more structure to my work and craft meaning for broader audiences that wasn't just reflective of my own feelings. So I went to study film production at university in 2017, which refined my ability to engage in my work more critically and to gain more perspective. And it was in early 2018 that I discovered VRChat, originally inspired by this article that I discovered. In this article reads quotes from users inside VRChat explaining how VR has saved their lives and it was profoundly affecting their relationships and their mental health. And I loved building immersive worlds in my films and was really thirsty to tell stories about people and culture and community. And so VRChat, a place filled with thousands of diverse worlds and people, felt like a really intriguing space to explore. And I should also mention that outside of my film background, I'm a huge gamer as well and grew up playing massively multiplayer games where I had a lot of online friends that I'd socialize with regularly. And so the stories of online connection and forging online friendships was something that I felt personally connected to as well, which certainly drew me in to the platform. With that inspiration, I immediately started interviewing people about their social experiences inside VRChat. And at this point, I was just on desktop without a VR headset, just recording my display. And all my expectations about social VR being a tangible place to be immersed in with other people and how it was profoundly affecting people's relationships and friendships, it was all happening and it felt very true. Through exploring and interviewing various different people over about a 2-month period, I stumbled into a few stories which became my first short documentary, A Wider Screen.
You know, the age group of people that have the most time on their hands and, you know, the most energy are young people. And so they're going to take this medium and they're going to bring it up to mainstream. What's that going to look like? I don't know. Yo, let's go to the Japanese flower gardens and with the cherry blossoms. Bam, you're there. Yo, let's go play mini golf on the moon. Well, bam, you're there.
You know the only complaint I have about this Avatar cosmic? I have really small boobs. Look really small.
Yeah, you just pick, you know, it can be anything tonight, you know. And I thought, oh, that looks quite cute. I'll wear that.
I'm very interested in how we can use social VR to treat mental health disorders.
I loved him. Like I don't know why, and I would love for it to just be normal.
I created this short film in my free time outside of film school, and all the theory and practices I was learning in film school, I directly applied to what I was making in VRChat. So this was my first experiment in applying traditional documentary film principles to a VRChat story, specifically in ideas around poetic and verite filmmaking and constructing a cinematic truth in this other reality, which I'm going to speak more to that when we get to We Met in Virtual Reality. I learned a lot making this short, especially in the importance of using world aesthetics or different VRChat world aesthetics to create tone and meaning, but also the best approach to respect people's anonymity in VRChat through directing a documentary in this space. And it was also my first step in making something that felt artistically fulfilling for myself, and then considering how to distill the meaning into a film that others can benefit from. And I did this by showing family, friends, film tutors, and various different people versions of the film as I was editing, and really responding to that feedback, but also staying true to the meaning that I wanted to present. I was really lucky that I managed to get the film into festivals by running a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo, which paid for the music licenses and festival submission fees. And dare I say, I believe this is the first VRChat film to be screened in a cinema and at a festival as well, which is a cool bit of VR filmmaking history, but I think maybe someone's going to come after me, now that I've said that, potentially. But some history nonetheless. A photo up on this slide is of me after playing the film at the British Film Institute at London Short Film Festival, which was a really big moment for my self-confidence and my belief in my work, which are two valuable things that are really important to feel and reflect on when you're putting your work out into the world as an independent artist, I believe. But we can't be confident in ourselves all of the time. And honestly, I felt like when I was making my first film, I felt a little bit like this the whole time. And this is a video of me in the first avatar I ever made. And for those making their first films, juggling the different aspects of movie making, it's okay to feel like this sometimes. After releasing a wider screen, I was enchanted by VRChat, and I wanted to experiment with shooting a dance-led documentary about VR dances with full-body tracking. And similar to a wider screen, through socializing and exploring, I ended up meeting this fabulous community called Club Zodiac, who are a dance group inside VRChat that hosts these spectacular dance shows with talented dancers, all with full-body tracking. And they were really popular in 2019. Of course, there's loads of dance clubs nowadays, but in 2019, it was still really incredible to me. It's still very incredible today.
I definitely cannot describe myself as a pole dancer in general, because this is not the activity I'm developing in real life.
Give it up for Saki, everybody. Oh my goodness, this queen over here.
Ladies! Everyone deals with own things and their own issues in life, but when you're all together with people, it makes you forget about them.
They accept whoever and just nurture you to be.
It's a bit of a hard cut. I apologize for that one. I created this short film called Club Zodiac, which is a portrait of this community through a collection of interviews and observational moments. And this was my first time really investigating a community and finding my own footsteps in how to approach filming a larger group. And just like some live action approaches, I found that immersing myself in the community was the only way to fully understand the attitude of the dance group. So I went to all the dance shows, parties, talk shows, podcasts, and through that, I discovered people that I felt had strong voices to represent the community. And I really enjoyed this process of collaborating with the community to make a film and to work really closely with my subjects. It was also through this film that I found a love for crafting dance in VR, and specifically capturing dance on film. I think there's a magic that occurs when you see someone dancing in an embodied avatar and they're just purely expressing that version of themselves. I got really obsessed with that during the making of this short film. I realized that dance presents a truth that only exists in the film itself, where a person's avatar becomes their whole identity, free from gender identity and spatial awareness. I'm going to talk more to that when we get to We Met in Virtual Reality as well. But the reason I bring this film up is because it was surprisingly my most creatively challenging project. Although production went really well, thanks to the wonderful people that I filmed with, I went through this frustration during the edit where I structured the film out, but it just wasn't landing right in the edit, and I couldn't find what it was. I realized that when I made a wider screen, I was shooting my lived experience, playing and exploring the platform without much consideration for what the cut of the film was going to be until I got to editing. And with Club Zodiac, I figured I should be more deliberate in forming a really solid structure from the start, which actually ended up trapping my creative freedom. I realized I think it's so important to play and remember to play with your work and to remain flexible at every stage of the process, especially in the edit. And a key part of making work independently is giving yourself the tools you need to create. So I want to encourage people to ask yourself what parts of your process might be halting your creativity. Part of playing is also collaborating for me. So lean on the people around you to help inform the process that inspires you most. And also, if you're in film, this is definitely for filmmakers, watch a lot of films. Old films, new films, avant-garde films, documentaries. I feel it's important to be studying all of the time to help find a language for your own work, but most importantly, to find out what you love and what inspires you the most. And this is a picture of me when I got my very first VR headset after finishing Club Zodiac. And after creating 2 films and researching all about VR, stepping inside it for the first time, all of my research came flooding to a realization, and it was obviously an amazing experience. And by fortunate timing, I was then commissioned by a streaming platform to shoot a documentary series in VR. And this streaming platform was a group of people, an incredible group of people that I met at a festival who believed in what I was doing and really wanted to help celebrate and share stories from VR. The show was called Virtually Speaking, and I worked on it somewhat full-time alongside my final year of film school, which was really stressful. I don't recommend any film school goers to work a full-time production whilst in school. It was very stressful. Here's the poster where you can see the cast of the show. I cast these characters, or these wonderful people, in various ways, finding people who I felt had really strong personalities, and also people I could maintain a conversation with. This was the first project I filmed entirely with myself in VR with a headset, using the native VRChat camera, which you can see in these making of stills. I want to mention that I was going through a dorky alien phase when I was filming Virtually Speaking, and it was just a phase. So, we've maybe all gone through an alien phase, or perhaps it's just me. But anyway, you can see that the show was actually shot using the old VRChat native camera in comparison to today. But regardless, the experience of operating in VR, standing present with my collaborators in the world, was just everything that I dreamt about. Virtually Speaking really depended on on having varied locations to give each interview tone. So I spent up to 2 hours most days whilst in production, world hopping across the thousands of user-created worlds here, conducting test shoots ahead of every interview. And it was rare that there wasn't a VRChat world that suited the composition that I had in my imagination. And it was through this project I also learned how fun and informative location scouting is in VR. A lot of the time, I would realize how I wanted to write a scene of the show by wandering around and location scouting in different worlds. The production of Virtually Speaking was in 2020, from February to June, and obviously during that time, COVID hit and lockdown happened. And very quickly, VR became my second home, surrounded by friends that I'd made whilst filmmaking and in places that I'd grown a lot of personal attachment to. And I really don't know how people responded to my direction looking like this weird version of Maz from Star Wars, but it worked out in some way. By fortunate timing, a new camera came out, created by a really talented member of the VRChat community named Hirobiki, which could simulate depth of field and different focal lengths. And I'm sure a lot of you watching know this camera by now. It's called VRC Lens. And the experience of actually looking through my camera monitor and capturing a moment in such a raw and natural way, and the ability to shoot handheld and change lenses, pull focus, it brought me back to the joy of capturing a scene in the physical world with my very first travel films. And by this point, I'd grown myself as a person, and I had so much personal attachment that I really needed to express about the platform. And with this camera, the context of COVID, being immersed in various different communities, and also graduating from film school, I suddenly felt like the work that I did before this moment was like training for the pandemic. I was burning to make something longer form that represented my own experience of VRChat observationally, unobstructed, and authentically. I also wanted to find longer stories that I felt audiences outside of VR could really connect to, that would bridge the gap between VR users and non-VR users. The approach to making We Met in Virtual Reality was very organic and process-driven, capturing my lived experience of VR, editing playfully as I traveled along. I took an anthropological approach in studying established communities and then interviewing people I felt had a strong voice in each context. I revisited Club Zodiac to explore a story about sexuality and dance. I got involved in the Helping Hands sign language community to explore a story about teaching and mental health. I captured dance battles in the International Dancers Association. I documented the community meetup, which is a space for new world creators to show new worlds. I captured drunken nights on Poppy Street, which is a Japanese drinking street, and I had no idea what anyone was saying. But I shot everything with a very distinct camera presence, and I focused on capturing and reacting to moments that I felt spoke a certain truth. My key inspirations for this kind of community-driven approach was Bombay Beach by Alma Harrell, Hale County This Morning This Evening by Ramel Ross, and Paris is Burning by Jenny Livingston. They all present narratives told by multiple protagonists to present an overall emotive impression on a place or a community. And I wanted to do the same thing, but in several different communities all at the same time, because all I had to do was step through a portal to access one to another. And I found with this production, in comparison to my previous ones, I was drawing a lot more influence from physical films because I now had access to a camera which could simulate and shoot in the same way that these films could. The production of the film was about a year long, and I filmed with over 30 different groups and individuals. And as like my previous films, I was looking for people who I felt could reach a broad audience with their story, and also who I felt personally inspired by. And it was through this creative traveling process that I discovered the core stories that became the heart of the film. And here you can see some photos with me and the lead subjects. And I'd like to take a moment to share how I met each of the subjects, because that's a question I always get during Q&As. In the middle with Jenny, with the pink hair, I met Jenny making Virtually Speaking. She was in the final episode of that show, and her sign language teacher, Ray, really inspired me with the way that they built a community to teach ASL as well as different sign languages, and I knew that I wanted to share her story further. To the right of Jenny, Dust Bunny and Toaster. I met Dust Bunny at a dance battle where she was doing this belly dance fusion, and I was completely obsessed with her dance, and she informed me that she wanted to start the now Virtual Dance Academy, which is an incredible community now. Back then it was just starting, and I'm really excited for her. She's in the audience, and so I'm getting all mushy now. But we met at the dance battle. She introduced me to Toaster, which kind of became the story of the film. And BTVR, which are a group of streamers. I met them at Rain Dance Festival at one of our social events. And finally, Dragonheart and Azure Boy, I met at Club Zodiac. They were volunteering there and managing the events, which is the same club I made the short film for in 2019. Moving on. Once I had an understanding of each of the subjects' narratives, I wrote loose scenes and plans to guide our interviews. And here you can see a really simple interview setup with my questions, a location scout image, and the final picture as well. And because VR is such a new world for the majority of this film's audience, it was really important to me to use some classical documentary techniques to help people relate to this space. And one key to that was shooting really simple talking head interviews, which are really common in expositional documentaries. This really helped ground people in the context of the stories and also help people focus on the voices of the subjects. And in terms of how I got to understanding the subjects or the people's stories, after speaking with Dust Bunny and Toaster, for example, I would write their story out after a conversation and start to break it down into how I feel it could be structured into a film. So I had a foundation laid for how the story would then continue. I'm going to do a quick time check. Oh, we're fine. Okay, very good. I also took the freedom to shoot reference photography for the setup interviews. This is a still from Jenny's introductory talking head interview and my reference from location scouting. I took reference footage for almost every scene I directed, which was a really big chunk of time during production, but very much worth it. This slide shows a lot of very flamboyant images of me location scouting, and if you've seen the film, these are all locations that made it into the final cut of the documentary, which I find hilarious to look back on. Especially me walking down the aisle at Dragonheart and Azure Boy's wedding, which I think I need to specifically shout out. For the introductory scene with Azure Boy and Dragonheart, which comes a bit later in the documentary, instead of relying upon a talking head situation for their introduction, I gave them the freedom to share the story of how they got into VR over a game of pool. And the mix of their voice, their real voices, and their body language over the interaction with the pool table, it presents a much more interesting conversation that I felt mixed these two truths. Fantasy truth and authentic truth. People are always wearing masks in documentary filmmaking. Whenever we're interviewed, we are aware of the camera, and we're sometimes unconsciously presenting a version of ourselves. Then in VR, that camera version of ourselves is exaggerated so much that it's an entirely other character existing in a world. And so the line of truth is a lot more real and visual. I think part of the joy of watching a documentary filmed in a virtual space is understanding the truth of it, which I really wanted to embrace and explore in this feature. I used cinematography to really exaggerate the fantasy truth as a tangible, real place by grounding the camera very physically and in a realistic way that felt on par with a live-action camera. And on a sound note, I used all the voices recorded in VRChat through the subject's own headset microphones, which often sound bad and not great quality, but it really helped emphasize and connect with their authentic truth. So there was a balance between fantasy and authenticity. And surprisingly, I never got any comments about the sound of people's voices in the film because it made sense for the audience watching it. And some of this thinking relates to how that was achieved. I also want to mention that this inspiration is partially why the film is filmed entirely inside of VR without any cut to real life. This is the sort of truth I was interested in exploring. A scene that illustrates this idea I feel the most is the dance sequence between Dust Bunny and Toaster. We choreographed a dance together inspired by how Dust Bunny and Toaster met in real life for the first time. And in the film, they first tell their story through their voice in a talking head style interview, and then their dialogue drops away into this uplifting dance montage. In this dance, the question of their physical identity drops away, and they're just Dust Bunny and Toaster. And to me, this is probably the most verite aspect of the production, where the truth of the film is most distinct, and we are just embracing the joy of their on-screen personas. And this collaborative dancing is also a method that is used in Alma Harrell's documentaries, for example, in Bombay Beach, that was mentioned previously. The editing process began as soon as I started filming. I edited the scenes over the year-long production, crafting the narrative arc of each subject, guided by emotion and instinct. Something that was really important to me was starting the film really light on its feet and quite chaotic, and then ending with a slower pace with a lot of thoughtfulness. And the key inspiration for that was to pace the film in a way that would reflect my own journey entering social VR, where it's really overstimulating and quite crazy, but then once you find connection with people and find friendship, it's easier to make sense of the world. Which maybe is something that is reflective of the real world that I'm just considering, perhaps. And I feel this is a good point to raise the greater thinking behind the film too, and ask why this film should exist in the world as well, or a question I was asking in the edit. So why We Met in Virtual Reality? Why does the world need this film? Well, in 2021, we were still in a semi-lockdown state, and VR was obviously very popular during that time. But the world was having a lot of trouble understanding what VR even was. And it was important for me to focus on, well, for that reason, it was important to focus on human-centered design with this film and reaching people where they were at with this technology and really understanding how much understanding people had about the technology. Because the film is about technology in kind of an indirect way as it is really about the people. To that point, the key was presenting human-centered stories and allowing the subjects, the people in the film, to tell their own stories and to allow audiences to forge their own truth and understanding of the technology. I also wanted to demystify social VR with all of its imperfections, clipping, jiggle physics, and hilarity. Show VR for what it is. No mention of the stuff around the context of VR that was causing a ton of confusion to what actually matters about this technology, which for me and this film was the people. Also, a lot of other films about technology, they present their stories with investigation and in a very factual way. This film is about grounding people in the very fundamental themes of love and loss. So I hope it would subvert expectation of what people would consider when going into a kind of tech-related documentary. Using the pandemic context as a way to forge empathy with couples facing long-distance relationships. During COVID, we were all having to do some level of long-distance online, and that context created a path and an open door for people to really connect with the broader picture and specifically long-distance couples who are using VR to be together and communicate, something that we could all relate to in that time. And finally, the years during COVID were not easy for most people, especially those who lost loved ones, and I wanted the film to recognize that. And to be a bit of history from when the internet was really important for human connection. I want to say that not all the time should you be considering why the world needs your film, and the broader audience, as focusing on yourself can be really helpful. But for me, it has always strengthened my work when I consider the landscape that my film is entering. And then this happened. And then the world really needed this film. So coming into post-production with the documentary and understanding that I had a film and a story to tell, and that I felt the world really needed this film with the confusion and VR becoming a lot more popular and mainstream in the media, I crowdfunded $10,000 to fund the film to go to festivals. And I want to say thank you to any supporters who are in the instance or watching on stream. Thank you for making the film happen. Once the film was funded and I was able to get the music licenses and festival submission fees, I did a whole round of feedback screenings, similar to my short films, listening to feedback and understanding the broader perspective that people were having on the documentary, and re-edited and polished the documentary. And then I fired the film into Sundance Film Festival. And I want to say, before I move on, if you're curious about Indiegogo and crowdfunding projects, the We Met in Virtual Reality Indiegogo is actually still public, and you can go and read it. The video trailer, though, is not. So if anyone wants to see the Indiegogo video that helped promote the film and got the $10,000, you can come find me, and I can share it with you. But the Indiegogo is still live. You can also see, before I move on, the color grading of the documentary here on the left stills. I wanted the film to feel really warm and welcoming and intimate for the stories that were presented. And so you can see the raw VRChat images on the left and the warmer color grade on the right. And for any curious people that haven't noticed already, the film was edited in Premiere Pro. I was completely floored when the film was accepted into Sundance Film Festival in 2022, which was a really transformative moment for me. I was really fortunate that I already felt fulfilled by just the process of making the film. And so at this stage, my focus was entirely on how to present it into the world, which I think I'm really lucky to say. If you're already feeling fulfilled by the process of making and just having your work there, that's a really good opportunity to then focus entirely on how can you give that experience to other people. I partnered with a sales agency called Cinetic Media and 2 production companies, Field of Vision and XDR, to take the film to festivals. For those curious about how those companies got involved, one of them scouted me from the Indiegogo campaign, which is another great reason to do crowdfunding for your projects. And it was from there we lifted off and started working together to take the film to the festival. The Sundance premiere went spectacularly well, which I'm very grateful to say. The film was quite polarizing for audiences, and one specific distributor who enjoyed the film was HBO. I had a long conversation with the HBO team, and the most important aspect of that conversation for me was, are they going to celebrate the film in the same way and with the same values that I have? And I was fortunate that the answer to that question was a big yes. And I was very fortunate that they wanted to celebrate the film with the same values that I did. And so I formed a deal with HBO. And beyond that point, I took every opportunity that came after Sundance and within the HBO context as well. This is a collage of taking the film around the world. We did a year-long tour around festivals, and you can see some of the festivals that the film went to below. And this was a really intense process. I am handling this almost independently alongside the production companies that were assisting with a lot of the logistics. It was a very overwhelming time, and so I kind of want to acknowledge burnout symptoms because that's something that every creative person can engage with and relate to. I try with all of my major productions to foster a really supportive environment for the cast and the crew that are involved. And the benefit to that effort is that it will always return to you. I feel really lucky that the family around this film was so supportive and so positive. creating this safe space allowed me to thrive and participate in as much as I wanted to, because I knew that the cast were behind me and could assist in the logistics and the tour if I needed to. And for me, releasing the film, it wasn't so much about me, but it was more about celebrating the people that I just filmed with and was telling the stories about. And I feel really lucky to say that. That's a very fulfilling experience. And there's some of the people in the film in the instance, so thank you for that. Maybe those watching. And I think that's my biggest reflection about the making of We Met in Virtual Reality. Through carefully selected locations, giving subjects or the people I filmed with freedom, immersing myself into different communities, and being aware of all the different layers of truth that come with making a documentary was the recipe to how I achieved the film. A lot of the time, I would be filming an event or an interview, and I didn't really know whether it would be a moment in the final picture of the documentary. And it was actually those scenes that are often the most precious. I made this film entirely by myself with just a burning passion to represent the people and the world that I love. And I want to encourage everyone watching to follow your own curiosities and to not overly consider what your outcome might be, but just trust that it will be beautiful. Now, to wrap up, I want to mention what I'm doing now. I talk about being independent and how I found my independent voice, but I'm actually not anymore. I'm still working very much independently on some projects, but I'm really excited to be now leading a small studio who are working on several developing film and TV projects that are using social VR as a production tool, as well as trying to pioneer and build new virtual production tools that can empower those filming in headset in remote areas of the world using full-body motion capture. And the studio is called Painted Clouds. That wasn't clear. That's all I have. Thank you so much for listening, and you can find my website there and my email if anyone has any burning questions. Thank you so much. And we can take questions.
Woo! Thank you, Joe. I do have one question. Are you a human? I don't know.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, if there wasn't enough furriness in the presentation, I'm going to change.
There
a little small.
It is.
I might be covered by the podium, but here is my incredible furry persona, which I'm so lucky to have, made from the incredible Max Films, Sterling Griff. Thank you for this gift. I adore it. Bird Joe, even. And we can take questions as bird form.
Yes, of course. So for anyone watching, please go to our Furality Discord and go to the Crafting Documentaries Q&A channel. And you can ask your questions for Joe Hunting right there. I will start off with a good general question from Eki Lou. What are the most difficult moments or challenges during recording these documentaries?
Oh, that's a great question. I assume that's more of a technical question. And I think sound it's really important to bring up there. When you're doing audio recording in VRChat, especially years ago and being an independent, your head is the microphone, and so ensuring that I maintained eye contact with the people that I was filming with, so I was capturing in stereo, was always kind of a place of tension to make sure I didn't accidentally move into the diagonal space where I was neither in one ear or stereo, and there was this awkward gray area. Another way I would resolve that is I would just move entirely and just capture it in one ear and then convert it to mono and then stereo. So sound is a challenge, but I feel like there's ways to improve that now, perhaps in newer technology. But that was one challenge. Another very real challenge was making the film from the UK and filming with almost entirely US and Canada-based people, and so I did not sleep very much, and I was also editing the film during the day, and so I was living the life of a starving artist, and was didn't take care of myself as much as I do now. So if you're not sleeping and not taking care of your time zone, it can be quite dramatic. So time zone was also a challenge. Better now.
I know a lot of people from Europe can relate with all their American friends in VRChat. That's for sure.
Probably during this convention as well, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. But, thank you so much. We have time for a few more questions. I will ask a question from, also from Ekilu. Oh, actually, no, apologies. From Sakahira. What advice would you give to those looking to explore filmmaking for the first time in VR?
Oh, it's a great question. This probably goes back to the themes that I've talked about today, but don't limit yourself. Play and have fun. Use yourself as a model to block out your scenes. Don't wait for anything to happen. I would just jump in and start using the camera, start playing with the idea that you have and block it out. Filming in VRChat, specifically this platform, I feel is so immediate. You can jump into a world and immediately get an understanding of a mood or a scene that you're trying to cover. And so my biggest advice would be to jump in and try it, because it is so accessible in that way. I could go on, but that's my big answer.
That sounds awesome. This is a question from Where Geek. I'm actually kind of interested in this. What is your favorite unexpected moment you had during your documentary process?
Oh, that's such a good question. There's so many. Oh gosh, I think I have to talk about the wedding. Is Your Boy and Dragonheart's wedding. So they're a long distance couple who had a virtual wedding in the documentary as a way to kind of celebrate their relationship in VR and their commitment to each other. And it was a beautiful moment to capture. And it was a 3-hour, maybe beyond 3-hour shoot, very late. And they had every single person of their guests speak about how wonderful Is Your Boy and Dragonheart was. And I could never have written or expected what they were going to say, and it just filled me with so much joy every time they got a message from one of their guests, and one of them is in the film, and is so precious, and was a moment that really informed the title of the film as well, as they say, we met in virtual reality. So that Is Your Boy and Dragonheart's wedding ceremony guest thank yous and appreciation was definitely a moment that surprised me. But I could say so many. I'm sure the cast who are here with us also could say so much.
Of course, yes. All right, awesome. We have another question from Neck. You said the film was polarizing when you showed it at Sundance. Could you elaborate on that? Were people really against VR romance or something?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm saying good question to all of them. The film was polarizing in the way that some people really felt connected and understood the world of VR and the internet, and it just had a kind of good knowledge, I think, of representation and kind of the language of the internet and this space. But some people came into the film without an awful lot of context of the internet and were just completely shocked by the jiggle physics and how outrageous some of the avatars are in the worlds and the kind of language of our world here is. And so it can be quite shocking for audiences in that way. And some were considering the cast as very lonely. And that was a comment that we received, to be very honest, out of the Sundance premiere, which was really surprising, because this is a film about connection and how VR and social VR platforms can enable connection in times of need, but also in general times. And so, I was really happy to read both the very polarized, very shocking and confused reviews, as well as the very positive reviews that came of people that really found a lot of relatability and understanding in the stories that were presented.
There you go. Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe Hunting. We are out of time for our Q&A, but thank you so much for everyone to ask questions. The channel's still open, and you may look into that channel, ask questions. We will wrap it up with just one more question, which is, I assume Painted Cloud Productions, Painted Cloud Studios, excuse me, is your next step. But what is next for you think, as we wrap it up?
I am making several new films at the moment, and I will say that if you felt like there wasn't enough of the furry fandom in my previous work, then please continue to follow me, because you'll be pleasantly surprised by what might come next. And that's all I'm going to say.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Joe Hunting.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for watching.